in the mains revision classes. Okay, now coming to the last question of the day. How and to what extent would micro irrigation help in solving India's water crisis? Question is very straightforward. Question is how and to what extent micro irrigation will solve India's water crisis? What this question is not about. This question is not about India's water crisis. This question is not about benefits of micro irrigation. Please understand that. This question is not about the benefits of micro irrigation, nor is it about the present water crisis. This question is about how micro irrigation and to what extent micro irrigation will help us solve India's water crisis. Why this question was asked? Because it is part of a syllabus of types of irrigation systems in India. And as you can see in the previous year mains, repeatedly questions have been asked with respect to the water management in the Indian agriculture. And this question also has relevance as far as current affairs is concerned. What kind of relevance? In the year 2018-19, Niti Aayog had published a report known as Composite Water Management Index Report. According to this particular report, India is presently staring at its worst water crisis in its history. Demand for drinking water will outstrip the supply by the end of 2030. 20 Indian cities will reach ground zero, which means they'll no longer have groundwater. And this could potentially lead to a loss of 6% of India's GDP. So water crisis will lead to an economic crisis, 6% loss of India's GDP. Question is, why are we facing this kind of water crisis? Obviously, there are a number of reasons, including the climate change. But one of the biggest reasons is the Indian agriculture. Indian agriculture utilizes more than 85% of the water in India. The water use efficiency in the Indian agriculture is lower. When I say water use efficiency, it basically means that Indian agriculture is using more water than actually what is needed. Water use efficiency is lower. Okay. So now you are required to discuss as to how and to what extent micro irrigation will help us solve the present water crisis. Are you getting this point? So how will you create this linkage? How will you create the linkage? First, you will say that we are facing water crisis. The water crisis is on account of agriculture, because agriculture is using more water than what is actually needed. And how micro irrigation will enhance the water use efficiency in the Indian agriculture. Are you getting this point? The flow. Okay. So let's understand the content for the answer, and then I'll discuss the structuring part. Can you look at the content, all of you? So I've already discussed the background, the present status. The question is, why the water use efficiency in the Indian agriculture is so low? And to what extent micro irrigation will be able to solve these problems? That is what is the question, right? Why water use efficiency in the agriculture is lower? First, see, even today, almost around 53% of land in India is rain-fed. Only some part of the land is irrigated. And in the irrigated areas, most of the farmers practice flood irrigation. I hope you know the flood irrigation, right? It's like inundating the entire land with water, standing water, to cultivate rice, sugarcane, etc. So when we go for flood irrigation method, the problem is irrigation efficiency is extremely lower. How much it is? 38%. So according to some estimates, the irrigation efficiency in India is only 38%. This means that out of the total water supplied to the crops, only 38% is ultimately consumed by the crops. Are you getting this? Only 38% of the water is actually consumed by the crops. Remaining water gets wasted. So don't you think we are wasting more water to the flood irrigation method, right? In case of developed economies, the irrigation efficiency is much higher at 56%. Whereas in India, the irrigation efficiency is only 38%. Second, in rain-fed areas, we are facing greater variability of monsoons, greater dependence on monsoons, and we have not given adequate amount of focus on rainwater harvesting. Okay. Next is with respect to groundwater. Now, this is very important. In case of India, the way we treat surface water and the way we treat groundwater is completely different. The surface water is normally considered as a public property. Look at the rivers, lakes, all of them are public property. But when you look at the groundwater in case of India is considered as private property. In India, we have a British era law known as Indian Easement Act 1882. As per this Indian Easement Act, if you own a land, the water beneath that land also belongs to you. Are you getting this? Can I say both groundwater and surface water are part of the water cycle? But the way we treat groundwater is different from the way we treat surface water. The groundwater is treated as private property. Since it is a private property, you can extract as much amount of groundwater you would want to. No restriction. Apart from that, the farmers get subsidized electricity 24/7. So farmers get subsidized electricity 24/7 and they have private ownership of the groundwater. They can extract as much amount of groundwater they would want to. This in turn has led to rapid depletion of the groundwater table. Right now, in Indian agriculture, 60% of the water that is utilized is a groundwater. Only 40% is the surface water. So don't you think we are overutilizing the groundwater, right? Next is with respect to cropping pattern. Obviously, most of you know that we are focusing more on water intensive crops such as rice, sugarcane, wheat, etc. And these crops alone account for 38% of the area under agriculture. Are you getting this point? Now, you just have to highlight as to how micro irrigation will help us these problems. You have to create a linkage here between these two. As far as micro irrigation is concerned, most of you know that micro irrigation means drip irrigation, sprinkler irrigation that delivers water directly to the root zone of the crops. By directly delivering the water to the root zone of the crops, can I say the demand for water will reduce? Demand for water will reduce. We will be able to reduce evapotranspiration, right? And at the same time, we would be able to enhance the productivity also. That is why the government has launched two important initiatives. One, Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchai Yojana, per drop, more crop. And the other one is Micro Irrigation Fund, which is presently managed by NABARD. So as part of this Micro Irrigation Fund, NABARD in turn provides loans to the state government in order to assist the farmers to adopt micro irrigation. How micro irrigation will benefit help us in solving the water crisis? You can write these points. I hope these points are self-explanatory. I don't have to explain that. For example, we can integrate micro irrigation with the canal irrigation, right? So whenever there are canal water which is directly used, so this canal irrigation can be in turn integrated with the micro irrigation. So rather than going for flood irrigation, we can use micro irrigation. This will in turn help us increase the efficiency. We can reduce the groundwater depletion. We can integrate the micro irrigation with the rainwater harvesting in the rain-fed areas, which will help us promote climate resilient agriculture. Micro irrigation can also be adopted for water intensive crops such as rice, sugarcane, etc. So don't you think here you are able to address that these are the problems for the low water use efficiency, and this is how micro irrigation will help us solve. Here we are creating a link between the two. Okay. And incorporate Dalwai panel's recommendations that adoption of micro irrigation can lead to 40% water savings, 45% increase in productivity, and 50% increase in the income levels. But the question is, how and to what extent? Second part of the question is to what extent? Now tell me, do you think micro irrigation alone alone can solve India's water crisis? It alone cannot solve India's water crisis. At the same time, there are a number of problems as far as micro irrigation is concerned. First, according to government, right now, we have 141 million hectares under agriculture. Out of this 141 million hectares, we can bring 70 million hectares under micro irrigation, which means, can I say, almost 50% of agricultural land can be brought under micro irrigation. But how much area is right now under micro irrigation? That is more important. Only 10 million hectares is under micro irrigation. So can it solve India's water crisis? No, because only 10 million hectares is under micro irrigation. That's the first thing. Second, now this is the most important point. Please focus here. Now let's say I'm a farmer who is practicing farming in an irrigated area. Okay. What kind of irrigation mechanisms I can use? I can irrigate through canal water. I can irrigate through groundwater, or I can go for micro irrigation. Clear? I can adopt 3 irrigation systems. As far as the canal water is concerned, in the states, farmers are actually required to pay for the canal water. We call them as water user charges. But in most of the states, the water user charges is not collected. It's almost given free of cost. So if I am practicing agriculture in an irrigated area, can I say I'm getting canal water free of cost? Yes. Second, for extracting groundwater, I have private ownership over the groundwater. There is no regulation of groundwater. I'm getting subsidized electricity 24/7. What do I have to do? I just have to buy a borewell. Minimum investment. I have to buy a borewell and keep on extracting groundwater as much I would want to. Third option for me is micro irrigation. Micro irrigation, can I say it is capital intensive? I require more of investment, right, to adopt micro irrigation. The question is, why would I go for micro irrigation when I have 2 other cheaper alternatives? Are you getting this one? I have subsidized canal water. I'm getting free of cost canal water. I have to make minimum investment to extract groundwater. Why will I go for micro irrigation then? So the biggest problem as to why micro irrigation cannot solve India's water crisis is the other forms of irrigation are more attractive to the farmers because they are heavily subsidized. So because of this, micro irrigation has limited scope in addressing water crisis. What is the way forward? As I discussed, water crisis in India cannot be countered only through micro irrigation. Water crisis is multifaceted in nature. Multifaceted problems require multifaceted solutions. What can be solutions? Multiple solutions, such as rationalizing of water tariffs in the canal irrigation, adopting changes in the cropping pattern. For example, you must have heard about the Haryana government scheme, where the government is giving incentives to farmers to shift from rice and wheat to other less water intensive crops, regulate the groundwater usage. So yes, to a certain extent, micro irrigation can solve India's water crisis, but we cannot depend alone on water crisis, alone on micro irrigation. We have to focus on multifaceted approach. Are we clear on this, all of you? So how will you structure the answer now? Suggested answer structure, look at the introduction. First and foremost, in the introduction, highlight about the present water crisis that India is facing. I link it to the Indian agriculture. In the body, 2 dimensions are must, and you have to make it very evident to the examiner. Look, I have addressed the demand of the question in 2 distinct dimensions. That is very important. So in the first dimension, how micro irrigation can help in solving India's water crisis, and why micro irrigation has limited scope. Both of these 2 are primary dimensions. And conclusion, strategies to solve the water crisis. How can you enrich your answer? When you're saying that water use efficiency in the Indian agriculture is lower, you can incorporate a diagram showing as to why water use efficiency in agriculture is lower. Then you can establish a linkage that, look, this is the reason Indian agriculture is using more water than what is actually needed. And this is how micro irrigation can enhance the water use efficiency. Incorporate the Dalwai panel recommendations and also incorporate the government initiatives to promote micro irrigation. So look at the answer now, suggested answer. Can you see the introduction? Introduction is, according to Niti Aayog's Composite Water Management Index, India is facing worst water crisis in its history. This underscores the need for enhanced water use efficiency in agriculture, which accounts for 85% of the water. And then I've highlighted that these are the reasons for the low water use efficiency. Then in the body of the answer, I will discuss as to how these reasons can be addressed through micro irrigation. So you can see here the body. Micro irrigation promotes precision farming by making water available to the root zone of the crops and hence lead to 40% water savings and 50% increase in the income. These headings are very important, these things. How micro irrigation can solve India's water crisis and why micro irrigation has limited scope. So write 2 to 3 points here, 2 to 3 points here, and then the conclusion. Conclusion is, going forward, micro irrigation has to be supported by separation of feeder lines, rationalization of water tariffs, changes in the cropping pattern, regulation of groundwater, etc., to solve India's water crisis. I hope we are clear now, all of you. Yes. So this is how one could have answered the 10-marker questions. So as I said, as far as this 10-marker questions are concerned, most of the questions were very straightforward. So you have to understand the demand of the question and write according to the demand. Identify what is the primary dimension and focus more upon those primary dimensions. And remember the value enrichment points. The value enrichment points are those points which can help you to get that additional marks, additional push. So try to incorporate those value enrichment points in each and every answer that you are writing. So in today's class, I have discussed the 4 10-marker questions. In tomorrow's class, we will discuss the remaining 15-marker question. Okay. So in case if you have any doubts as far as this session is concerned, you can start asking the doubts. I'll start clearing the doubts one by one. Okay. Yes, Rohan.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Rohan.
Sir, as far as we have seen the GDP, we have seen the GDP at real GDP, nominal GDP, and GDP at factor cost and market price. So, but there's one more GDP at PPP, purchasing power parity.
Yeah.
So what is that and how is it different from the real GDP and nominal GDP?
Don't worry, that is beyond the scope of the discussion that we had so far.
Okay.
But since you are part of the QIP module, right? So we will be having the revision classes. In the revision classes, I will be discussing how the purchasing power parity is actually calculated in much greater detail. Don't worry about it. Okay. But what all things I have discussed in today's class, is it clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Someone else was asking doubts in a chat box. So I was not able to go through the chat box. In case you have any questions, please raise your hand or you can ask me the doubts in the chat box so that I can answer your doubts. Ramakrishnan, sir, under which section will this video backup available? Ramakrishnan, this particular video will be available under the folder of test, discussion, and strategy classes. Okay. Raju, sir, please give suggestion regarding cracking the prelims. Don't worry, Raju, this is a class for the mains discussion. As far as current affairs class is concerned, whenever I'm meeting you next time for the current affairs classes, in the first 5 to 10 minutes, I will discuss as to what should be your approach for cracking the prelims. Clear, Raju? Sir, we will get the PDF for this session. Yes, Mansi, you don't have to worry. The PDF for this session will be given to you. Some of you had asked me the doubts when I was discussing. So in case if you If your doubts are still there, you can raise your hands or type in the chat box. Yes, Mansi?
Hi, sir. I just have one question.
Yeah, Mansi.
Understanding how tenancy reforms can be beneficial to the economy. Why
Yeah,
are
yeah.
farmers reluctant to be a part of this?
Farmers.
Yeah, I mean, when you explain that example of farmer A and farmer B,
Uh-huh.
why is farmer A so reluctant to be a part of this
He is
reform?
not reluctant to he is not reluctant in terms of leasing his agriculture land. What I explained was this particular farmer is reluctant in continuing with the agriculture sector. See, this farmer is just having just 1 acre of agriculture land, and when the land is very fragmented, right, what problem it creates is the productivity of these small land holdings is extremely lower. This farmer does not have access to inputs, so he feels that probably if he migrate to urban areas, he could have much higher income. Clear, Mansi? Yes, Mansi.
Yeah, sir, I understood that point. So my
Okay.
question is basically, I mean, you understand the benefits of all these reforms which are going on.
Yeah.
I mean, is the farmer not aware of the benefits when it comes to, let's say, I mean, my question is that I am aware of this is going to happen when I am not interested, or maybe I don't have the inputs to go in this agriculture sector. I should, the probable next option should be, okay, I can lease out this what do you call this land to some other farmer, and I can get an income on that one. Why the farmer is not
Yeah.
open
See,
to
it's
this
not
idea?
with, I'll explain this thing to you. First problem is land as a subject. It is placed under the state list. Okay. So
Okay.
different states have adopted different models as far as tenancy is concerned. In most of the states, tenancy is highly restricted. For example, in state of Kerala, tenancy is completely prohibited. So if you are a farmer in Kerala, you cannot lease in or lease out the agriculture land. That's the first problem. You got
Okay.
this?
Yes, sir.
Second problem is only some states have legalized tenancy. These include West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, and so on. Even in the states that have legalized tenancy, the land records are not modernized.
Okay.
The problem that it creates is, let's say I'm a farmer who is practicing agriculture in Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu government has allowed the tenancy, but the land records are not modernized. So I will have genuine fear in leasing out my agriculture land to someone else. What if that person in future claims my agriculture land to be his because the land record is not modernized? Are you getting this, Mansi?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So
Got
that
it.
is how. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sure, sure. Sir, in the 10-marker questions, can we use the flowcharts alone in the body rather than writing in the paragraphs? See, as far as the 10-marker questions is concerned, I always keep saying, understand the primary demand of the question. Primary demand of the question cannot be written in the form of flowchart or a diagram. Diagram is to substantiate the primary dimension. Remember the question which I discussed? The question was how land reforms have benefited the small and marginal farmers. We did not incorporate the flowchart there to explain the benefits, but we incorporated a flowchart to highlight the problems faced by the small and marginal farmers, just to add value to the answer. Okay. Divya, so when will revision classes of QAP will start? Divya probably will be starting it in the month of March. The date has not yet been decided. I hope it's clear, Ramkrishnan. Okay, fine then. Shall we write the answers and post to you or mail, sir? Yes, Raju, you can post the answers. You can mail it to me. Don't worry. I will, whenever I get a free time, I'll go through your answers. Divyam, Taneja, sir, in question number 2, can we write about the importance of budget in planning and fund allocation? Divyam, here you must understand the question is of 10 marker. And here the question is very straightforward, where you are required to distinguish between the revenue and capital budget. So there is no scope for you to highlight about the importance of budget in planning and fund allocation, because the word limit will be crossed if you go into these aspects of budget. So stick to the demand of the question, discuss about the revenue and capital budget. That should be sufficient.